Hey everybody, welcome to another Art Talk. Today we are interviewing Malcolm Wope. Malcolm, say hi for everyone.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me, Gabe.
You're so welcome. You're so welcome. So could you tell everybody a little bit about who you are, what you're up to, and where you're currently living?
Sure. My name is Malcolm Wope. I go by Rocket Boy Art on social media, and I am a character concept artist and animator residing in Cape Town, South Africa. And in terms of what I'm doing, I guess I'm most known for creating Kung Fu's Dead, and we're in early development with that with a studio. And I work with Triggerfish 2 on Netflix's first African animated African created animated series, Mama K's Team 4, as a lead concept artist. And aside from that, I've done work for I'm doing work for DreamWorks. I've done some stuff for some Korean studios, Red Dog, doing some animation for them. And yeah, in general, just I love animation. I love characters. So I try to get as much done as possible. There's some stuff I'm missing out, but that's the gist of me.
Amazing. So, it's not just good enough for us to know how badass you are right now. I want to go really far back and figure out stuff that I don't know about you, and I don't think anybody knows about you. Could you dive a little bit further back, like way back into maybe even your childhood, and just tell us, where did you grow up, and what was that like for you?
Sure. I was actually born in West Africa, Cameroon, and my dad he worked in the U.S. In between the U.S. and France at the time, and we used to visit him every once in a while. So it was actually quite interesting because, like, at the time I must have been like 4. Every time I'd go visit him in the U.S., it was like my first encounter with like a 24-hour channel dedicated to cartoons. Mm-hmm. And when I tell you I got obsessed, like because like when you come from nothing, right? Mm-hmm. And then you go to a place where it's like, oh, there's cartoons all the time. It kind of like you get obsessed, right? So I was like super into, like, I remember watching a lot of Power Rangers. There was what's that other show? Thundercats, the Sentinels, the X-Men animated series. So I used to like binge a lot of that stuff like all the time. Silverhawks. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like, it was interesting because when I went back, I kind of always used to, when you get given something to you and then it gets taken away, like you try to like latch onto it. So I'd always kind of draw the characters that I had seen and stuff. So I was always drawing. And then we actually moved to the US and France for a bit, and then SA. And by then I must have been like 7.
Okay. Geez.
And by that time I was just like drawing all the time. I was super into it. And I think like the combination of my parents never saw the value in drawing that much. They kind of always wanted me to focus on work. So they would never, like, all the stuff that I was super into, like PlayStation, games, animation, they wouldn't like buy anything of that sort. So whenever I could get my hands on one of these things at a friend's place, I just like internalize the stuff I was like watching, and then I'll go home and just like fantasize about the day my dad's gonna finally get me a console, But then the only way I could exercise that enjoyment was drawing. Yeah, I did most of my schooling and high schooling and university in Cape Town. Also in high school, like we had a really cool art program. I went to a boys' school called Rondebosch, mm-hmm. And the teacher I had, Mr. Putter, shout out to him. he a lot of art programs will send you through one program, one kind of line of or way of doing something, and then you come out as the artist that they've designed, maybe. He was very much about finding what you wanted to do. So whether it was film, animation, this and that, he'd really like hone in on what your vibe was. And as a kid, like I was big into anime, like proper Weibo, like Naruto, all that stuff. And like he didn't dismiss it as like, oh, what is this cartoon stuff you're doing? Like to do some paints. He was like, all right, like get into it, you know, like design comics, do some animation. And at that early age, like of 14, 15, I was already like dabbling, trying to make my own comics, doing like animation tests and that type of thing. And over time, it just kind of sort of escalated into being able to do better and better work.
That's amazing, man. And I think everybody gets to be a little lucky today. I consider myself one of you guys because I haven't seen this before, but Malcolm was kind enough to share with us today some of his older work. So I'm going to just jump and share screen if you don't mind. The pièce de résistance. Right, there we go, guys. Sorry to delay on the TNA.
I was like, what's the actual? That was actually for Cosmopolitan magazine. It wasn't just me being a pervert. It was a 50 Shades of Grey type vibe, and they needed illustration. Oh, so I was an illustrator, by the way. I wasn't a concept artist at all. I was like a pure illustrator, and they needed illustrations for this like story that they had in the magazine. Yeah, that was one of the stuff.
Yeah, man. I was just saying, look at the quality of this, right? 8 years ago, guys. Look at the really awesome depth, foreshortening, everything. It's like a lot of skill in here already. And I was saying, looking at this pop art stuff, like this tonal stuff, you kind of brought back into your recent work.
Yeah, I think with a lot of that, I definitely spent a large portion of time being an inker, and just working with those kind of like half tones and stuff. So like my first job was actually at Super Strikers, and we had to do a lot of I was an illustrator, but more an inker too. So I kind of transitioned between the two. Yeah. And through that, I really delved into like how to use black ink to create depth, etc. And obviously, like with that, you start like branching into what illustrations might be like with just flat colors, not really focusing on values per se, but more just on what you can do with sort of limited tonal ranges and stuff. And it's only a little bit later that I tried to start like digital painting. When I started working for a game studio, but for the longest time, I definitely did focus on just line work and simple colors, and seeing what you can get out of that, what mileage you can get from that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I look at a piece like this, for example, and I see like the incredible care that you take with every single line. And it's almost flying in contradiction to the kind of drawing you're doing currently, where I feel like you have a much more confident shorthand and you're less preoccupied with the final finish. What do you think about that?
Yeah. So that is such an interesting thing. It's like, I think I see this often with a lot of, if you look at artists, like the progressions, I think like for me anyway, there was a certain stage where I was very meticulous and very kind of like particular about like getting the details right and getting those fine kind of things, and basically telling myself like that's what's going to make a strong illustration, and that can make a strong illustration. But I think over time, I don't know if it's laziness or matureness or whatever, maturity, you kind of like, you start picking like the things that you want to push in your illustration. I think that's what I like to think that's what I'm doing now, is like I'm focusing on form for this one. I'm focusing on just the colors, just the values. And I think, yeah, it's like back in the day, it was just kind of like, I want to get in as much mileage, like pen-wise in this illustration, and now it's a bit more specific to certain areas that I'm trying to push. Like, how are these shapes kind of informing the illustration I'm doing now? You know, as opposed to getting an illustration out.
So it's like looking for a specific end result out of your particular moment. It's like, I'm looking for a color, I'm looking for a shape, I'm looking for a basic design, I'm looking for like what is happening over here. And then do you find yourself like, okay, I've answered a whole lot of questions, now I can start to tighten the process? Is this quite similar to how you approach a design brief in-house? Could you walk us through that?
Yeah, well, that's again with what I just mentioned now. That's a result of working in-house at studios, because you kind of have to like really be quick with sort of conveying the information that you want, and sort of the fluff is like not really important. It's about like, oh, okay, what is this? What are we getting out of this image like quite quickly? And I think that's definitely affected my style. It's like yeah, I can spend 2 days like kind of focusing on someone's like markings and nose and eyes, or I can spend like an hour just really like pushing out something that still looks good and is legible and is exactly what I want to communicate. So I think it is that it's about like, I would say from working in studio, it's trained me to be a bit more concise about the things I'm communicating in an image, like what it is I'm actually like trying to push out.
Totally. And I almost feel that the medium itself, the job description itself, has moved you in that direction more recently, that I can notice. For example, you mentioned you were working in illustration before. With illustration is the final product, right? It has to be tight. Whereas in production, it's like, well, actually, I'm just looking for something and I'm hoping to answer questions for people down the line.
Exactly. It's exactly that. And it's such an interesting thing, because with I think it's not like one's better than the other. I think I benefited a lot from that way of thinking too, because it's kind of, you only gain the confidence to do something loose when you know that given the time you can make it tight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you can't really just produce looser work if you don't know how much you can push it. So like you need to go through the one aspect of things to be able to do the other, and just to have that control between.
Absolutely. I love that you use the word control, because I feel like that's what confidence is. It's you've done something enough times that you can say, okay, I've done the finished piece, I've done the polish, I've done a whole bunch of these. What do I want to achieve now?
Yeah. And listen, that's not to say like you never stop trying to push the polish, right? Like, because I still need work on,
it's still
like,
within you.
You won't be able to paint like Dan, or even yourself. Like there's still ways, there's still levels to work with. But I think there is definitely like, I think as an artist, it's nice to be able to push something and then scale back and basically produce art for what you need, as opposed to just like flexing muscle. It's like there's different outcomes to art.
Absolutely. And having worked with you, I do know that one of the benefits of having you on the team is that when I communicate, or someone else communicates to you that we need something to be pushed, I think you understand what that means. That means like, okay, this is the time to actually just play with this and really see how far we can push it until it's on the verge of breaking. And at that sweet spot, then it goes into production, and hopefully production doesn't, completely annihilate what you've done.
That's the story of my life.
That's the juice. So tell me a little bit about your career journey. Like, how did you end up moving into animation?
Sure. So to bring back my parents again, like my parents never intended for me to get into like arts or animation or anything. And to be honest, at the time, like, because I'm about your age, like 32 now. At that time, for me, there was in my surrounding, there was no such thing as like, oh, I'm gonna be doing concept art for animation. For me, it was just like either comics or maybe I should actually like properly do animation and see if I could move to Japan. Like that was where my head was at. And so comics was my big thing. Comics was the thing I was trying to push, because like that was the easiest way I could like get what's in my head onto paper and then make money out of it. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
draw and make money.
Yeah.
That was where my head was at. And maybe I should have been a bit more aware of the industry. So I was pushed into architecture at at the behest of my dad, and I hated it. But it definitely, I did learn a lot while I was studying. Firstly, like architects work like dogs, man. Like it was sleepless nights and everything, and that gave me a work ethic, I think, that I definitely pushed into my more creative work. And also, like, the parameters were so rigid in architecture, and I was in a situation where I wanted to be as creative as possible in terms of like I would put in like interesting characters in these cross sections of buildings, and like I was just trying to like be as non-architectural as possible within the confines of architecture, and that kind of like that those constraints kind of, I think they helped me further on along the line. So yeah, after architecture, I kind of graduated, and I was like, I don't want to be an architect. I need to get a job. So I got a job at Super Strikers. I was doing like inking and some illustration for some of their comics. And then I freelanced for a bit, and that's where I started really cultivating my style. Like, Striker was great because it actually transitioned me from traditional to digital. That was the first time I like encountered a Wacom tablet and all that. So after that stint, I kind of started just like really trying to find my identity and style. I started a freaking t-shirt company, like printing illustrations on that, and then I got into storyboarding. I was doing a lot of storyboarding for like adverts and stuff, and I started building a little bit of. Around this period, I was posting a lot online. It was the t-shirts that I was doing. I was posting online. The storyboard like jobs that I would do, I'd put online, and I would also, at the time, I was big into tricking. It's like a sort of martial arts, gymnastics sports. So I used to do a lot of art for the tricking community at large, and I think those are sort of the impetus of me, or the things that helped me to actually start being more having a presence on social medias, because like I would do arts based on these like super popular athletes, and it would get shared around, and it would motivate me to like do more in that specific sort of that niche kind of tricking circle. And then I eventually landed a job at blah 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 Studios, which did like a lot of mobile and casino games. And that was great just because they allowed me to very early on in the in me working there, I actually got offered a job as an art director, which really allowed me to experiment a lot with different styles, stuff that I was not comfortable with. And it's like, I guess it was a difference between someone telling me what to do and me being the person that's like, let me try things, and if it fails, it's on me. So yeah, it was really cool. I got to like work on a variety of different projects, and also like with casino games and mobile games, the turnaround is super quick.
Yeah.
So you would only be working on a project like maybe a month or two, and then the next month is something different, and the genre is different, the style is different. You dictate the style, because the clients are like, we want a dragon ninja, like, what do you suggest? And then we would like pitch a style. So it was really good to be able to like have that control in trying so many different styles and things, some more successful than others. But yeah, I think that's where I really got my footing into, firstly, being quite flexible in style, and then after that honing into like what am I as an artist. And I think after like at the peak of my work there, that's when I started doing stuff like Triggerfish and other things, and really getting into proper like the animation industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So to support some of those ideas, I just had a question that popped up. It's something that I've covered in previous interviews, and I've even asked others about. I get this impression that there are a whole lot of youngsters who are trying to break into this industry today. And one of the things that happens is they play their favorite video game, they get sucked in, and they go, you know what, I want to do this for a living. Or it might even be a movie or an animation, and they try to move into those circles. But what typically happens is they say, I want to work for the Pixars. I want to work for the Disneys. I want to work for, these mega galactic, Bungie, these big game companies when I graduate or when I feel like my portfolio is ready. And yet most professionals I talk to have gone through the ringer. They've actually escalated their career in terms of like starting really small, not sure where they are, trying a few things, jumping into various industries, whether it's inking straight into CG, straight into like animation. Your journey has been, let's call it a long one so far, it's got a lot of richness to it. And most professional artists I know who are still around and worth their salt with what they're doing have gone through that. What do you think is going on that kids today think that they can just kind of, in 2 years, make it to like the highest position?
I would say, well, firstly, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a positive thing because, as I said earlier, like when I was in high school, the line, the sort of path wasn't there, right? So you kind of just like, fuck, what do I do? Let me try comics. And I think the thing that we have now, at least from my perspective, is the industry is big enough to be organized, and there are a lot of models of like, this is what I want to do. Like like you have people that you can look up to and follow their path. It's a lot more focused, I would say. I think like people of the newer generation, kind of like when you're in school, there's less of a veil about what's happening in the industry. It's a lot more like, I want to be a character designer, I want to be a keyframe animator. I want to be really good at rendering scales on a dragon. It's a lot more specific, I think. And I think that's a good thing. But the con for that is like, it does breed a little bit of entitlement, because you do have to like do things you might not want to do, and also like be ready to be able to be shifted into directions that might help you get to where you want, or those goals might shift a bit. So I think there's definitely like a change in the industry. The industry is a lot more, there's a lot more of a social media presence. You know exactly what it is that you want to do now. And whereas for me, like coming up, like I didn't know. I just wanted to draw and hope I wasn't poor. That was it.
Maslow pyramid of needs, tick.
Yeah. And I think the newer generation is lucky in that sense, actually. It's just because like there's just more clarity as to what you can do. Like if I had to go back in time and speak to myself and be like, how can I convince my parents like there's a job here? It would make my life a lot easier back then, because I'd be like, oh, I actually know what I need to work on. And frankly, I would have probably started like being more focused on to exactly what I wanted in order to do that now, and I would have been a better artist for it. But yeah, as I said, there's pros and cons. Like I might not have ended up at a gig where I can try different styles and experiment and maybe find something unique. I might have been, sometimes you get sucked into a system. Let's say you come in too green into a big, especially big studios, right? What happens is like you just get like stuck in a position or streamlined into a position where you're just part of the big cog, and you're not necessarily a disruptor that you would like to be.
Right.
And sometimes it's about like maturing on the outside and then coming in as a more mature artist. So like there are pros and cons, and it depends on people's personalities. Like different people want different things.
Absolutely, man. Wow, like there's so much there to unpack. It's just like, I know that there are certain things in there that you touch on, which is, for example, one thing I'm very interested in is this idea that there is that potential that once you get inside a studio, you can stagnate. And there's a certain, different studios obviously have different levels of freedom. Some are very strict and they say, stick to this one thing. And others are like, okay, we're going to throw you on another project next year. Just hang in there and it's going to be completely different. And as an artist, we always want to try new things and experiment and expand. So that's a really healthy environment, but not all studios have that luxury. So if you find yourself in a studio that's sort of dragging its feet for 3, 4, maybe even up to 6 years, and you're still sort of holding on to that paycheck as if it's like life and death, there is something about that I find a little bit like you have to be self-aware enough to say, oh my gosh, this might not be for me.
Yeah. Again, it's about what you want. You know, like I know people that are like, that's it. You know, like I come to work and there's a specific thing that I love doing, and I'm going to be good at that thing. And if I'm getting paid for it, that's fine. I don't need my name on anything, etc.
I don't have an online portfolio, nothing.
But I mean, like a lot of people that come out of school, they do want their name to be pushed forward and etc. And they want to build their brand. And sometimes, not, as you said, not all studios. Some studios actually like are really open to that, but there are some studios where you need to get stuck into one pipeline. And to that, I would say, like, I guess I was in not a similar position, but in a position where I was unhappy with a job I was at that wasn't necessarily exactly where I wanted to be. And to that, like the onus is on you to kind of just produce the stuff that you want to be working on. I think that's like the biggest thing I can say to anyone. If you're unhappy with a job situation, or you want to be at like the studio, etc., that you want, whether it's like a horror game thing or blah, like produce the stuff, like basically show people, hey, look at what I can do, and have those studios be like, man, I wish we had someone to do that with us. You know, let's holler at him to do it for us. Does that make sense? Like I would say, a good example is like the Kung Fu is Dead stuff. I never planned to pitch it or anything. It was just like I wanted to work on stuff like that. So I started like, I came to you, you know, I was like, yo, I need some environments for this thing, and I want to make it look as done,
polished,
as made
as
possible, so that when people look at it, they're like, yo, does this exist? Like, and it doesn't, but it's like, oh, but who made it? Like, maybe we can get something similar from that person, you know? So that's like, I think it's about, like, if there's stuff that you want, then start doing it by yourself and get good at doing it. And other people, like, I'll overpromise and say 99 to 100% of the time, if it's dope, people will be like, yo, we need that person to do it for us too, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think you're the king of like understanding how to make cool into an IP, and then like unbeknownst to anybody, it just is, well, unbeknownst to you maybe, it's like people are talking about it behind your back and being like, man, this is so cool, when can we chat to Malcolm, let's get this rolling. Like you may never have had an intention for Kung Fu's Day to get picked up, but like there's that old adage of, if you do something so well, eventually people can't ignore you.
For sure. And like it's just, I think, to add to that, I don't think I ever want to be in a place where it's like I'm satisfied. There's that like mentality of just always being hungry for more, you know, just like just keep pushing. And I think that's like, for an artist, that's like a really good thing to have, that tenacity. To be like, I need more.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it's like I often tell my students, you know, at the end of the day, yes, it's what you're doing is hard, or you're trying to produce something that's really big. But if you take a step back, you might realize that all you really have on this planet is time. So you might as well invest it in something that you're passionate about.
Yo, time is such a big thing, especially the older you get. It's like, it is, as you said, the biggest resource you have. And I'm such a believer in like just incremental kind of learning, like sort of compounding effect. It just takes like, I don't know if this is unhealthy to put out, but like I started by just doing like 30-minute drawings after work, when I was in a situation that I didn't like. And that evolved into like, oh, I have a body of work after just doing 30 minutes after work for 3 months. Like, this is cool. Then it evolved into like, let me go till midnight. let me go till 2 a.m. Let me go to 3 a.m. And then you start like really like maximizing your time because you're so hungry to get things done. So it becomes like the mindset becomes like, oh, it shifts from I need sleep to how much can I do without sleep. And again, I don't know if that's an unhealthy message to put out, but it's about that mind shift of like, how can I utilize my time as much as possible to do what I want? I think that's kind of,
I mean, at the
and
end,
yeah.
sorry to interrupt, man, carry on.
No, I was just saying, like, I think a lot of artists that I speak to, like, that are quite good, like, there are exceptions. One exception is Daniel Clark. I don't know how that dude has the most balanced lifestyle I've ever seen for a dude that's a monster. It's wild.
Yeah.
But most other people, like, it's like there is that kind of imbalance where it's like I'll be messaging the homie, it's like, oh, you up? Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to ask you a little bit about that because to tap into that, if for anyone who has never worked with Malcolm, you may not know that Malcolm is really good at not just delivering on the day, but also he's always working on something on the side. You're always like hustling on a new IP or an idea or an animation. And anyone who follows you on social knows that. They always see you like pumping out stuff. In fact, what's quite interesting about your Instagram, I was going through it the other day and I was like, you know what? There's almost no professional work up here. It's all personal work. And people might think, oh, this is all you do. But in reality, it's only half of what you do, if that. And so I wanted to ask you, like, you're kind of known for, at least in my eyes, hard work ethic and the ability to get shit done. So how do you manage your time and to get such an output? You've kind of alluded to it in terms of like sacrifice and hours and things like that, but do you create any kind of like scheduling system for yourself?
Yeah, so that's been getting harder and harder with over time, just because like over time the demands from me have gotten a lot more hectic. I was so like at let's say a year ago I was managing with it just because there was a bit more control as to my roles, and now of late I've actually started like implementing like a PA and stuff, just PA sounds harsh. I have someone that's helping me out, like kind of just
manage,
keeping track of things and stuff. So it's difficult. It's not easy. I think for me, I'm a little bit in a transition period where I'm trying to like. This is a really good question. I'm actually trying to see how I can really like start maximizing my planning, because the tenacity gets you so far. Like the want to do things will get you so far. Now it's like I'm having to scale back and be like, okay, what can I not do? But my innate nature is like I just want to do everything. But yeah, now there's a bit more. I'm putting structures in place to kind of really plan exactly how I can use my time. But it's still the schedule is still insane. It's still like super late nights, early mornings, type of vibe. But it's getting there. As you can tell, it's a work in progress. The structure is a work in progress, but yeah.
Well, listen, man, like if it's a work in progress, like I think everybody needs some more work in progress in their life. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about this idea of leveraging what you have to get what you want? Does that make any sense to you?
Leveraging what you have to get what you want. So like is it like if you've got certain advantages, you like use it to its fullest?
Yeah.
Okay. Put it this way: if in Harry Potter the Sorting Hat, I'm a Slytherin. Yeah, I'm all for that. Like if you have any form of leveraging that you can take use of, like make use of that, man. Like you want to maximize any kind of sort of opportunity that's afforded to you, or any you want to be able to leverage as much as you can. The only warning with that is like, again, it's that whole, sometimes you do need to just watch out for if you are ready for something, because there is such a thing as being too green for something and then getting burnt by it. So I would say maximize a lot of that with things that you feel comfortable with doing, and then just in little increments, kind of just step out of that comfort zone.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's answering your leverage question.
I mean, in a way, yes. I like the idea of staying in one area and kind of just like expanding in that place and seeing where that kind of takes you. That's definitely an interesting take. So you have a lot of production experience now, or let's call it pre-production experience on various projects. What do you think, now that you've had that experience, contributes the most value to a project during that time?
Communication, big one. Having a bit more of a voice, I think, like initiative. Let's call it.
Individually,
well,
or
for
as a
the
team?
project, as a team. Okay, in both. So the way I see it is like, the one thing I'm also realizing is that sometimes when you go into a certain project, it's almost like, especially if you're there for hire, there's this fallacy where it's like everyone has everything sorted out and you're just like, you're kind of delivering things for that.
Yeah.
But the more I work on things, the more I realize that like everyone's working stuff out, you know, at the high level, like people are like
answering questions and
answering questions. So I think like it is a case of like being able to also like start getting in tune with what's going on
at a higher level,
as opposed to just being like you're just doing your job. It's like, okay, how, like, in what ways can I actually solve some problems that might not be foreseen? And I think like one of my main issues is like maybe not voicing opinion early enough about certain things. And to be honest, there's also stages in which you can do that. Like, I don't think it would have been my place to voice an opinion like
too early.
A year or two ago.
Yeah.
But with newer gigs that I'm getting, there's a bit more kind of like, I guess I'm a bit more proactive into trying to solve problems quite a bit earlier on, and that does come with a bit of experience. So yeah, I think just having that initiative, having communication is a big one, and yeah, I think for me, I think those two are quite major.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely, man. Like that's such a, I mean, being able to contribute to a project in ways that facilitate everyone else's job around you. Like if you had a ring around you, the more you can help that ring, I find people just kind of enjoy having you around. It's like, oh, thank God, like I didn't have to figure that out, or like, oh my gosh, you just took that weight off my shoulders, or I didn't even think of that problem. Like you just solved the problem we didn't even see was coming, and that can be quite valuable.
And one cool thing that I see, like even with peers and stuff, is like you can tell like some people are super dope when they're given a task, right? And let's say it's a very specific task. They would find a way to make that task easier or bring new light into the process of doing that task. Like if, for example, I know I don't want to drop too many names, but like this one concept artist was assigned with like designing props and objects and stuff like that, and then the brief was like draw this stuff, right? But she was like, why don't I just model it, and then you can extrapolate like all the sides, and that worked out better as a
solution
pipeline for later on. So it's stuff like that, you know. So like don't be scared to provide what you can offer. You don't have to necessarily always kind of just like follow the brief letter for letter. You should meet the brief requirements, but you should also like contribute like yourself to it.
Yeah. Either as a practical means or a theoretical mindset type means. Like, what do you think has been a biggest contributor to your skill level to this point?
I don't think I'm should I say naturally gifted? I think a lot of what I can do comes from just like a lot of hard work and like abundant kind of putting into craft. Because I like it's in my nature actually is like the way I like to learn. I think that's one thing that, and some people say this and it sounds like cheesy and stuff, but like I think I have a good way of learning things, like from anything that I like, and I get very obsessed with stuff like whether it's tech and whether it's drawing, whether it's animation, and it's like uh, I would say that's what's contributed the most into me leveling up, because I always try to find like, okay, how can I firstly do this as much as possible with the time I have? Secondly, what do I need to be able to get to a level that I can make complex things? And complexity comes from like like smaller problems
Mm-hmm.
that you master that are more bite-sized,
Mm-hmm.
and then like putting those together as you keep going. And I think I would say this is like the question is actually like learning, like what does this just be to like learn, let's say. And I think it's exactly that. It's just kind of like really being a bit more structured about like the way you want to learn, and
Mm-hmm.
also knowing exactly what you're wanting to do, and just being obsessed with it. I think obsession is another big one. Like you have to, I think you have to be obsessed with art and drawing and this stuff
Mm-hmm.
to push you level. Like it has to be like, you want to have that feeling where if you're not doing it, you start getting annoyed. You're like, I need to draw.
Yeah, absolutely. I often say to people that the most important thing to be a concept artist, in my opinion at least, is passion. Because if without that, you're going to hit a bunch of walls on the way to doing what you want to do. If you don't have that passion driving you through it, then you're probably going to take a step back.
The one thing I forgot to mention is also like with in line with the passion thing is like, I definitely would not have drawn as much or gotten as far as I did if I didn't have outside passions. Like for example, I love martial arts and like the sport I used to do, tricking, and that was like my thing. And if for example you were to tell me like if I'm to do concept art, I can't do any martial arts, I have to do like fantasy stuff, I don't think I would have gone as far. Like, so what I'm trying to say is like, do what you like. It was the things that like can sustain you forever, like
Yeah.
like you want to, it's not just about like, oh, I'm gonna draw. It's like, what do you like, like
Yeah.
what is it you actually like what you digging.
Yeah. That's so powerful. Yeah, but I mean,
Yeah, and
to be that honest and self-aware, I mean, do you think that's something that everybody's born with, or do you think that's something you kind of grow into?
it's so interesting. I can't speak for everyone. What I can speak to is that there is a definite like challenge, especially when with arts and trying to, I guess, build your brand, where it's like, okay, do I do things that everyone else is doing so I can get employed? Do I follow the trends? Or do I do this slightly niche, unpopular thing, but that I love?
Yeah.
Which is a hard question to answer. I would say get good at what you do, because once you're like really good at like that obscure thing, there's ways you can make it mainstream, So yeah.
And it's so interesting that you talk about like doing that thing that you love, because I see that in your work. And again, like I'm never sure of your intention with things, like on a base level, like looking at your stuff. But I have come to realize by observing you a bunch of things about the industry that you seem to be either on the cutting edge or ahead of people. And one of the things that stood out to me was this idea that you just mentioned, which is like, to me, artists have the potential now to become brands themselves. And I feel like looking at your work, I'm starting to see that. I'm starting to see, here's a flavor that if I want that flavor, I can buy that flavor. I can buy into that flavor and I can invest into that flavor. And I feel like, have you had people come to you because of that and want to work with you?
Dude, like 100%. A bunch of the jobs, like let's say 100% of the jobs that I've gotten have just been because of the brand thing. It's like,
yeah,
And it's a very fortunate and lucky position to be in, because you get into a situation where it's like the people are like, hey, we need you to do this. We want it to look like, they'll pull up like a post that you've done. It's like, yeah, I wanted to look like this thing that you did. And it's like, that's half the battle done, you know? It's not always the case. It's not as rosy as I'm making it sound. Sometimes people come to you like, we want you to do you, but they actually don't want you to do you.
Yeah, we just like you. We believe you can.
Yeah. But yes, as to what you just said, that's 100% it. It's like building a brand. Even the interesting thing about Triggerfish is like they mentioned it in one of the meetings. It was like, yeah, like each of you sitting in the studio, they're like your own mini brand, you know?
Yeah.
And I think leaning into that is definitely a good way forward. Because to be honest, most content artists, we just want to be able to work on stuff that we're enjoying, we enjoy. And a lot of us, like, and I've done it for the majority of my life, you compromise. You're like, it's not exactly what I want to do, but I'll do this and try to push as much of the things that I want to do in this, you know? It's like, but then at the same time, I think that's great to skill up, but I also think building that brand outside of everything is, and showing people like this is what you want to do and this is what you can do on a higher level, definitely helps. And yeah, again, like 100%, I can't recommend it enough. And if we're talking about branding and all that stuff, like all the jobs I've gotten have been because like someone has seen something. It's never been a CV thing like I applied. It's been like, hey, you posted this thing last weekend. The other interesting thing is like, I noticed like at the beginning when this started happening, I was like, it's a coincidence. But every time I post something, I'll give it like a week or two. Someone will be like, hey, that's cool. We want something similar. You know, there's this feedback effect.
Yeah.
And that's why, like, just to add to this, the importance of social media, like, I think, yeah, as you said, it's got a lot of my personal work, but in addition to that, I treat it like it's a client sometimes, where it's like, I'm going to put time aside to feed this machine in order to secure more stuff down the line. So it's quite important. It's not just like a scrapbook per se, which it is a scrapbook, but it's also like I definitely schedule out time for that scrapbook. It's like it's another job. It's another job. Pretty much.
It's amazing, man. Like when what we're talking about here, in my opinion, is the cutting edge of what I think artists are moving into now. Because if you want to talk about longevity, that's what branding is. Branding is legs. You know, you're going to be around for a long time if you start to establish that now. And the other crazy thing is, like, every time you post a piece on the internet, it lives forever, because it's no longer yours. In some regards, it's like you put it up there and the next thing you know, someone's typing in Pinterest and they see like that same image like 10 times. And they're like, oh, from different people who have saved it. Meaning that, you know, if that was a compromising image of yourself, you know, it would be on the internet. Let's just say that, right? So I feel like brand is now stepping into such a powerful territory where I almost feel like as a brand, you actually have work come to you, which is the opposite of what artists who are starting out struggle with. So my whole thing now is like, okay, the model is starting to change. People who are trying to break into the industry, they're wedging themselves in at the bottom where there's a whole lot of competition for those seats, let's call it, in the studio. Yet there is the possibility that you can come at it from the side. You can outflank that industry and you can come in super hard with an idea, with an IP, with a brand, and you can outstrip those guys, because no one cares about them when they're on social and they see your work. They just go, dude, why can't we hire this guy tomorrow? And you and I have been in that position where we're working on a project and it's like, what influence do we need on this project? Let's go look at some work. And both of us in different parts of the room will be looking at the same thing. And we'll be like, that's it. That's the answer. This guy over here has the answer.
Let's holler at that dude, you know? It's like,
can we bring him in?
Exactly. 100%. No, I fully agree with you. And I think it's from being on both sides of that spectrum, where, like, as you said, I'm looking at something, I'm like, damn, man, like I wanna this gotta be on the project I'm working on in studio, and I'll send it to like you or like the art director or whatever, and be like, yo, check this dude out. Like,
Yeah.
can we get him involved? It's definitely that's the case.
Yeah. You know, Bobby Chu from Schoolism, he released like a short booklet that I bought ages ago, and now he made it available online for free for everybody, called The Perfect Lure. And I think chapter 1 or 2 in that book is basically this idea that in order to get the client you want, you don't want to be approaching them, you want them to approach you. So how are you creating work that's going to bring them in? And he never mentions branding in the book, but I'm pretty sure if he rewrote that book today, he would be talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, like the other cool thing is just what I'm noticing in the industry at large is like the stuff that influenced you is starting to influence the people that have positions of power, right? So like maybe before it's like it was a slightly older generation, like the Glen Keanes and all that, and now it's like often when I'm in a Zoom call for a new gig at a studio, like the references that are being thrown out are like, yo, Naruto, and so like I think we're in a cool spot where this is harkening back to like the point I made about like doing what you like. Like I think let those influences like really build your brand. Like you want to be the one thing is you want to be authentic. You want to be like love the stuff that you do to a point where like when people come to you, they're like, oh, you clearly like really like this stuff, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. And this, I mean, we could be talking on this all day. I mean, it's so interesting. There's so much variety to it. But I want to ask you a few other questions that I think people listening to this, especially who are starting out, can get some benefit from. So what do you think about the internal struggles that artists face when they sit down to do something? Do you even feel that?
Yeah, well, this week I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do as a post, and I was like, the one thing is finishing work. I think that's like a big one. It's like because I have all this like work in progresses, and I'm like, damn, do I finish that? But I'm not feeling that. I don't feel like I want to do that. Maybe I should come up with something new. And the big struggle for me is like is finding something that I can do in a certain time frame that will feel like accomplished in some way. Because I hate cutting things like in the middle. Like if I'm working on something, I want to at least leave it at a point where it's like I'd be happy looking at it in a couple hours time. So if I'm like on a problem, best believe I'm gonna stay on that problem till like whenever. So yeah, I think that's a big struggle is like what to work on. Do you finish things that you've started, and how do you kind of manage like what you want to do versus what you're supposed to be doing, you know? And it's I don't know, like I don't think I even know the answer to that. Like I would say I more often than not I do what I feel like doing because I'm gonna get the best out of myself doing that, you know. And I think with that, it's just also like, what are you trying to gain out of this? A quick example is like animation. Sometimes I'm like, I really want to make an animation that looks dope, like looks finished. So I'll start like animating it in hopes of cleaning it up and everything. But other times I'm just like, I just want to know what this motion feels like.
Yeah.
Like I just want to, and it can be like very loose scribbles and stuff. So it's I think that is a big challenge, like deciding what it is you want to invest your time in and how and what you feel like doing. I think most artists probably can relate to that. A solution for that, maybe pick things that you like and stick to a theme that you feel like you can sustain, you know, for a longer period of time. And people notice that. People like if you're posting something and it's like all related, people definitely start picking up on your vibe, you know, and start looking forward to it. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's the power of the stuff you post, is that things are tied together and that people want to know more, want to see more, want to be involved. Like just a single piece, can not often have a life of its own. It's always like, oh, that piece that just got forgotten in the ether. But if it's part of something bigger, people want to go like, oh, you remember when he did that character on that thing? It's like, yeah, but he did a bunch. And then suddenly it's like you're opening this book and you're like, which one of these are we looking at? You know, and it becomes a conversation rather than, oh, that once off over there, that, you know, whatever it might be, Street Fighter fan art or something that like.
It's sorry to, this is a little bit of a sidetrack, but with that, it's so interesting, man. It's like coming up with an OC, because I started a new thing that wasn't Kung Fu's Dead, and it was really interesting, like starting from square one, because like with Kung Fu's Dead, for example, if I do something like about Kung Fu's Dead, there's this weird thing where it's like people are kind of invested in it already, and it's tied on.
There's an expectation.
Yeah. But then when there's a new like OC, like no one gives a fuck. It's so weird. It's like, and you have to like kind of build that.
Yeah.
And then same with if I'm doing fan art for something that's loved, like the quality of art can be a certain level, but just the fact that you've done it is like people are already like, oh man, like I remember this shit, you know.
Yeah.
And there, the power of having a some kind of universe behind something, you know, like some kind of background or whatever. It makes work that you produce better, because what it becomes is like you're not just coming up with something new, you're actually adding on to like a motherload of things that exist already.
Yeah. Because Kung Fu's Dead touches on so many points right now that people are in love with, you know, whether it's like Afro-futurism or like a different alternate universe or Kung Fu, or like so many points there that people want to latch onto. And so when you kind of amalgamated all those ideas together, you created like a super monster. And everybody kind of went like, oh man, who are these brothers? How can I see more of their art? And then people got to a point where like, you started seeing this. I've started seeing this because it's become so prolific. It's like fan art for an IP that hasn't actually been produced.
It's wild.
That's wild.
Yeah. That like it's so like humbling too. It's like, because with Kung Fu's Dead, I basically was like, what do I want to see? What do I like? And I love action. I love action cartoons. I love martial arts. I love like fighting games. It's got like there's a certain fighting game vibe it has to it. And I feel like it was so cool to see people resonate with that. And whenever I see like fan art, and sometimes I get fan art, I'm like, this is better than my shit. Like, fuck. You know? But,
chill.
It's super cool, man. And yeah, it's just like, the thing is, it's not out yet and stuff. And there's that bit of pressure that's like, man, what if people don't even like this thing when it comes out? But at the end of the day, it's like I love doing stuff. I love producing my own stuff. I love helping on other people's ideas too. I love adding to like other IPs. So it's just like a big swirl of just good vibes. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean the community is savage, and it's like it's almost as if you do something today and then like it's on Reddit tomorrow and then it just explodes, and it's like the fan base gets made around just the smallest thing now, which is pretty awesome. I think it's because we're all just so connected. So I wanted to ask you, what's something you've learned recently about being a professional that has made you think differently about your process?
I think I would say learning from mistakes, where sometimes, like for example, if it's what we're talking about, like producing things for the pipeline. Sometimes I used to get over invested in certain things, which is important. Like you want to be over invested in whatever it is you're designing, because that's what's going to get the best out of you. But I think like just being conscious about the things around that, you know, and the people around you. And also, like, to be honest, working with other people is so interesting. It's like sort of the counter side of being so kind of like working on art direction on your own stuff is like all of a sudden you're in a situation where there's other people's opinions
Mm-hmm.
and everything that's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
like in the mix, and it's like, no, but I'm right, you know, but no, you're not. Like it's just a perspective, and I think definitely working around that has been such a cool learning experience where it's like humble yourself, you know, like there are other ways of doing things and stuff.
Are you looking forward to that level of process on Kung Fu is Dead?
It started already on a story level, man. It's like one thing that was crystal clear in my head is like fuzzy with like 6 other people, and it's like, but this is my thing. No, all right, I guess not. Right? It's like it becomes like
yeah, it's your gift to the world. The baby's all grown
yeah.
up. It's independent.
Yeah. I think it is that. It's like working professionally is like definitely like that collaborative aspect is finding out how you can collaborate. Then on a practical level, just like in terms of drawing and stuff, I think one interesting thing that I've kind of picked up, I was speaking to Harrison about this the other day, is like, it's so funny. And I think even with you, working with you, that was interesting. It's like I would produce a sketch that would have some ideas, and then we might know what's up, but then an exec would be like, I don't like the vibe. And then I'm thinking like, is it because the design's not good or the ideas are not good? And then I just changed the way I put the strokes down. That's a bit more gentle, and it's like, oh yeah, that's it. And it's so weird. It's like little things where it's like, oh, it's about like how I put strokes down on the page that changed the vibe, you know.
That's
and
crazy, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, though, right?
Yeah,
Is that
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, just the idea of trying to please executives. It's not my favorite game because I really hope, and I do believe we'll move there eventually. But there used to be a time, like in the 30s and 40s, where artists ran studios and like animation studios, and I think that we should go back there. And I think that this level of fandom that's happening at our age group and a little bit higher is starting to bring that back. We were touching on it a little bit earlier where you said like you arrive at a studio and someone's already like showing you reference for the same IPs that you grew up with. And I'm like, that needs to be the thing. We need to push that because then everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, I fully agree. And battery running low. Hold on.
Emergency. Bam.
Boom. Sorry about that.
Cool. We'll just edit you out. I'm gonna put like an overlay, something horrifying.
Here we go.
Cool.
Back. So yeah, it's. I think I would love to be in a world where things are artist run.
Yeah, as long as the money. Okay, so here's the weird thing, right? It's like executives exist to say you have a budget and don't screw it up, and I guess producers do that too. And I think artists are actually quite bad at that because if we had our way, everything would just look crazy and cost $1 million like every time. So yeah, speaking of all of this, like what part of your job do you think is like the least desirable? Is it like a feedback process, or do you think like it's a part of producing the art itself? What do you hate about your job?
I think processes. I think that's a big one. Like if I have a certain process of doing something and then there's a process that's being pushed onto me, that's a big pet peeve. Like I hate it. And also the exec feedback and reviews can be quite rough, can be intense, you know.
That thing you loved, bye.
Yeah, exactly. But again, it's like coming to terms with that. Like hate is a strong word. It's kind of like, there's negative sides to things, sides that are a bit more difficult than others. So I wouldn't say hate. I actually love what I do. I love being able to draw for money. But yeah, there are those sides of things that are a bit like, oh man, that's a bummer.
The bummer side. So based on your own experiences up until this point, which of course we've just learned has been quite a rich history for you to get to where you are right now. Do you have any recommended advice for young artists who want to break into this industry?
I'd say definitely try find out what you want to do, like where it is you want to sort of end up, but also get as much experience as possible quite early. It might not be the experience that you're like desiring, like the big studio thing. Like if it's a small studio, like do it. And in fact, smaller studios are like really great places to learn because you have more responsibility that can be thrown onto you and you can try different things. And lastly, like if you're already in the industry and you're wanting to like go to the next level and you have that knowledge, just do stuff, start making things, right? You've got these connections, you've got these parties, just make a short film, do something. And then like, that's what's going to get people to be like, yo, we need to throw money at you and your friends to make something else. Or we need you specifically to help us, this big team, do something. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say to people.
Yeah. And do you think by developing something on the side that isn't necessarily tied to your job starts to demonstrate that you can build something of value that other people want to buy?
Exactly it. It's like you're like, what would you rather buy? Would you rather buy the potential for something or something that exists already and be like, oh yeah, we just need that, you know? It's like it's
Plug and
exactly
play.
that, you know? Plug and play is a good example, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that that's definitely the case. If like someone can see that, like you don't really have to even dig too much. Be like, oh yeah, you're doing it, then kudos to you, you know.
Awesome. So I wanted to ask, what do you think of having personal relationships, like romantic relationships, and growing as an artist and being in this industry?
Like how to balance that?
Yeah.
It can be tough. Well, firstly, like I'm not a Casanova or anything. I'm not a pimp.
These lying guys.
I would say, so for example, I'm going out with someone that is part of the industry, and like one of the biggest challenges that I've had before was if someone's like kind of loosely into art but not really into it, it's very hard for them to understand why I would be like staying up till like 2, 3 a.m. On work. So definitely having someone that like kind of gets or understands the value of what you're doing is such a big bonus. I'm not saying it's impossible. I think like there is also that thing like opposites attract. But I know for me personally, I definitely being with someone that really understands the value of what you're trying to make and do is such a helpful thing. Less explaining of why you're doing certain things, you know. Because sometimes it can, like, to be honest, it can look like, yeah, you're just drawing a whole bunch of cartoons all day. Like, what's up? You know? So yeah, I think for me anyway, just having someone that really can meet me on the same level.
Yeah. At least to sympathize with what you're doing, it's important. Absolutely.
Exactly.
So Malcolm, tell me, is there anything you still want to like achieve with your career, like specifically, like an outcome, a goal?
So much, dude. Like even more than before. You know, like before it was like it's all in stages. Like I need to make money with art. Get there, you're like, okay, I need to produce something that I can call mine. Getting there. But now it's like I want to produce something that's meaningful. You know, I want to like one of my big inspirations is Satoshi Kon, the Japanese director of Perfect Blue and Paprika and stuff. Yeah. Like man, that homie, like he got to produce stuff that's like really like it's almost like peeking into his brain. And it's just like such a great celebration of film, and it's not derivative, it's like pure. And I think like a lot of the stuff I've been doing so far has like in a sense been derivative of the things. And I think I want to get to a level where like I can direct and maybe even move into live action. You know, like who knows? I would love that. But yeah, I think those are the levels I want to try achieve is kind of bringing to the forefront some of the stuff that I grew up with and all the action stuff, all those sensibilities that I think resonate with certain people, but then like pushing that into like bigger levels and stuff, you know.
That sounds good, man. That sounds so good. I can't wait, honestly. I mean, I'm going to be around hopefully forever, so I'm going to watch that happen.
Who knows? I could end up on the streets. You never know. We don't know.
We don't know anything.
But yeah.
All we have is time.
Exactly. All we have is time. And yeah.
So tell me, man, last question. Are you into anything at the moment? Like really into it, like a video game or movie or anything that you recommend?
Man, I've been watching a Lovecraft Country.
Oh yeah?
The Peel show. Man, yo, that show is wild because the genres that it reaches is just like ridiculous. It's like
crazy.
A horror, then it's blaxploitation thing, then it's like there's a whole bunch of like magical Ku Klux Klan members. This is wild, man. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Animation wise, what have I been watching? Not too much. I've been into there's an anime called Doro Hedoro. It's on Netflix. It's quite interesting. It's like it's this dude with a lizard head, and he's trying to figure out who made his head a lizard. Leave it at that. And yeah, lately I've actually been rewatching a lot of like old films and movies I used to grow up with. I've been checking stuff like Spriggan, Ninja Scroll, Ghost in the Shell, Bubblegum Crisis. I've been watching like a whole bunch of that old stuff. This is because like I find like with the topic of derivative and stuff, like I find if we're talking about anime, the older stuff were less derivative of each other. They were a lot more like, how can we make like cool American action stuff but in animation, you know? So it was like their references are a lot more real and stuff. So like I've been watching a whole bunch of that stuff and a bunch of series. To be honest, like the thing that gets me through working at night is just like knowing that I have a series playing next to me and I can draw while I'm watching stuff.
Yeah.
So it doesn't feel like I'm just working. It's like I have distractions. Yeah, that's been it. But yeah, Lovecraft Country is the one that that's the one I'm watching quite a bit.
Sweet, man. I need to catch up with that. I just finished the first episode.
Yeah, what you think?
I thought it was good. I haven't read the book, so I can't really compare it, but I wouldn't mind at some point figuring out like where everything ties together. But really cool to see that a show can be lit, you know, and just be released to the world. And then what happens now is we just get this flood of concept art that just hits the scene, and we just all go like, oh my gosh, where was this? Like, and then, you know, this is an amazing time we live in, guys, like where you can just have the newest IP that gets released with the art. I mean, that tells you where we are with concept art. And what do you think about, you've seen the Boba Fett series, The Mandalorian.
Yeah.
Like, did you see behind the scenes how they're using screens now to do live action, like green screen? Dude, you got to check that out. That is blowing my mind. I seem to be talking about it on every call with people because I'm still like mind blown by it. It's like the latest tech, and it just looks like they're doing real-time CG. And it's like, what is this madness? And I just feel like we're getting closer to like the virtual reality matrix every day.
I'm gonna YouTube it right now. That's ridiculous.
Get it up for yourself. It's amazing. All right, man. So that's about it. I just want to say thank you to Malcolm for giving us his time today on a Friday to speak with us and share a little bit about his past, a little bit of advice for you guys, and of course his great wisdom into branding and all kinds of juiciness. Malcolm, I can't wait to maybe have you again on here someday. Who knows?
Sounds good, man. Like it was so cool seeing everyone that you interviewed on your Instagram. I'm like, damn, it's like I don't want to be left out. And when you reached out to me, I was like, oh yeah, I made it. So yeah, it's awesome, dope. Dude. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm super happy to have you, man. So have yourself a wonderful weekend, and I'll chat to you soon.
Cool, man.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.